And our final speaker is Arthur Bonsall again, and he's going to talk to us about his smallmouth bass work in Ontario waters.
Hello again. My name is Arthur Bonsall. I'm with the Lake Erie Management Unit of the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources. And today I'm going to be talking to you about a nesting survey that we conducted in Lake Erie for smallmouth bass. So the purpose of the program was to see if Lake Erie's smallmouth bass angling season and the spawning season were aligned appropriately. So smallmouth bass are fairly interesting in that the male bass will guard the nest throughout most of the spawning period, so it'll protect eggs and larvae from predators, it'll fan them to provide oxygen, and if the male bass is angled off the nest, it will potentially open these young life history stages to predators. In particular, round goby are known to be fairly significant predators of these eggs and larvae. Even when the bass is present, the bass will often chase them off. So we want to make sure that the spawning season and the angling season were distinct, so we weren't affecting the population of spawning bass, and we could have a healthy, sustainable population. So to do this, we were conducting a 5-year study in both basins of Lake Erie. We were doing a snorkeling survey to look at the developmental stages, but we were also getting information on temperature, and our goal is to create a model so hopefully we can predict nest development and temperature in the Lake Erie system. So as a bit of background, in Lake Ontario, or Fishery Management Zone 20, they changed the regulations in 2021, and there were 3 notable changes. The first is that they added early catch and release season from January to May. The second is they split the regulations for largemouth and smallmouth. Previously they had been together. And the last one is that they updated the smallmouth bass season. So previously it had been the 3rd Saturday in June, and they changed it to the 1st Saturday in July. So especially these last 2 changes were in part because a result of study out of Queen's University. So they had looked at the timing of smallmouth bass in Lake Ontario and found that a lot of bass were at risk if the season was the 3rd Saturday of June. And that was mainly because Lake Ontario was fairly cold. Some of the study that had led to the regulation being the 3rd Saturday in June was done in inland lakes, which tend to be warmer. But this study resulted in changing to the 1st Saturday in July to help protect that population. So on Lake Erie, we wanted to do something similar just to make sure that our regulations and the bass season and the spawning are all kind of aligned to protect this species. Currently in Fisheries Management Zone 19, which covers Lake St. Clair and Lake Erie, it is the 4th Saturday in June when the season opens. We had done prior surveys in the 1980s, focused on snorkeling surveys to look at where they were. There were other sporadic surveys over time. So in 2012, there were surveys looking at netting adult bass to see how many were in spawning condition, and that was in the West Basin. But for our survey, we decided to go back and do nesting studies. So we had snorkelers out from May to June, looking for nests with some of these early life history stages such as eggs and larvae. We did it in both the east and west, alternating each year. When we're out in the field, we were 2 days per week, and we were swimming transects looking for these eggs and larvae. And we put these transects in areas where we thought bass would be. And I'll speak a little bit to that on the next slide. Because our goal wasn't to map out the area of where nesting bass were, it was to get as much information as possible as we could, so we wanted to get as many nests as possible. In addition, we put out temperature loggers to monitor temperature throughout the season, and they're in both basins throughout all the survey years. So our survey areas, we're focused on Long Point Bay in the east and Pelee Island in the west. The next slide will have maps. But we focused on those areas because we knew they were known spawning regions for bass. We also, similar to these, set our transects where we thought they'd be, but we also looked at historic studies and literature to see where bass were in the past. And we also, if we knew about it, looked in areas with gravel or sand bottoms and a lot of short vegetation. We exclude areas with high vegetation, which weren't great for smallmouth. It's more of largemouth habitat. So the top right picture might be hard to see on the projector, but there is a bass in that picture. And in the bottom right section is a nest. It's a little darker. It'll go in an area, fan it out, and protect that area, and often either hover above it or circle kind of around it. We also, if we saw it from the boat, looked at hard structures such as logs or boulders, because bass tend to use those to nest around because it'll protect them from wave action. So these are survey maps. On the left is Pelee Island. Each of those black lines is a possible transect where we would have looked. It generally encircles the entire island, but avoids areas where the ferries are and public beaches. We didn't really think those would be great for bass, but it's also just for safety of our technicians. In the east, we focused around Long Point. So the top map is the inner bay. It is a bay within a bay, as the name suggests. There's the larger Long Point Bay and the inner bays inside it. It tends to be fairly sheltered. Water warms up fairly quick compared to other areas of the Eastern Basin. And this is where a lot of the 1980 studies occurred. So we have three areas, Sturgeon Bay, Bait Island, and Rice Bay and Millionaires. These have been surveyed in the past, and when we had surveyed them, there were a lot of bass there, so we kind of focused on those historic units as well. And another area we surveyed was Bluff Bar. It is outside of the inner bay, still in the Long Point Bay region, but it's more exposed and open to some of those colder waters of the Eastern Basin. In the past, there have been some surveys there, and they didn't find a whole lot, but when we had surveyed, we found a lot of nesting bass, so we kind of expanded our search in that area as well. And the yellow section is a sanctuary, so it's kind of unique in the area, and it's a no fishing sanctuary at all from the middle of way until the bass season. So I keep saying life history stages. What are we out there looking for when we're surveying? We start with stage 0. It's not a life history stage, but it is basically when a male bass finds a spot that it wants to nest. It'll go in an area, fan out a divot in the substrate, and start doing nest guarding behavior. It'll also look for females, and if it's lucky enough, a female will join it, and they'll move on to stage 1, which is eggs. So again, I don't know if you can see it in the projector, but there are eggs in that nest. They're very small. They tend to blend in, and when we're surveying, we snorkel down. If we see no nest, we see nothing in there, it'll be stage 0, or if we see something, it'll be some of the other stages. And let me tell you, the bass tend to be very territorial. You often get hit in the head sometimes, depending on how angry the bass is. Stage 2 is bottom fry, so after these eggs hatch, you'll see the small black larvae in the bottom. Larvae that have newly hatched will be quite clear and see-through, so you really have to look for them. And stage 3 is swim up fry, so the bass larvae have grown enough that they'll come off the bottom and start free swimming. At this time, the male bass will protect them for a while, but then will kind of take off, and they're on their own. To get from stage 1 to stage 3, it's approximately 2 weeks, but it really depends on the climate and the water temperature. So we're still in the process of collecting this data, but I want to focus a little bit on future analysis. So one of our main goals is to develop a model to predict nest development in relation to temperature, and this is really in relation to the work that was done in Lake Ontario. So in terms of temperature, we're looking at degree days, so that's just the number of degrees above a certain threshold over time, and it's more of a consistent measure of temperature. It's like cumulative. So if you did an average temperature of 11.5, that would be 1.5 degree days for that date, and then you pretty much just add them up over the season. We're hoping to get a model such as below, which also came from that Lake Ontario paper by the Tufts lab. So stage 0 is the nest. We can see as it declines, the number of nests with eggs will peak and then decline. The number of nests with larvae will peak and decline, and the number of nests with swim-up fry will peak and reach 1%, because at that point we consider the nest to be complete. The guarding bass doesn't have to be on the nest for the larvae to survive. Just some expected results from 2024. So this is in the inner Long Point Bay area. On the y-axis on the left, that's the number of degree days, and that's those dots you see increasing over the survey days. And the bars are the number of nests we found at different life history stages, and that's the y-axis on the right. So we can see in early May, actually I'll go to the lines as well. So we have the red line, which is 50%. Using the Lake Ontario model, that's where we would expected 50% of bass to have reached the swim up fry stage. And the black line is when the season actually opened in 2024. So in early May, we can see not a whole lot, but we see empty nests and nests with eggs sort of creep up. By early June, we start to see our first little bit of swim up fry. We still see a lot of empty nests and nests with eggs, but by the end of June, we see a lot more nests with swim up fry, and by the season had opened, we had only found nests with bottom fry and swim up fry. We weren't really seeing any of those eggs or empty nests at this time. If we just look at temperature, this might also help us predict where we'll land in Lake Erie. There's a lot going on in this graph, but the black lines are the average number of degree days on a certain date. The gray area around the line is plus or minus 1 standard error because temperature shifts between years. The red section are potential opening dates for the bass season. Because it's the fourth Saturday in June, it can effectively swing a whole week. It's not a certain date, so there's a week period where the season could open. And the red lines of 80% and 50% are, as I mentioned on the other graph, where we expect 50% or 80% nests to be complete. So the inner bay sites, Sturgeon Bay, Bait Island, and Millionaires, they tend to section close together, though the ones closer to the open lake will be a little colder. But we expect all of them to have reached at least 80% by the opening of the season. Bluff Bar, which is closer to the open lake, much colder, but we still expect it to be between 50 to 80% by the season open if we're just looking at temperature. In the west, a bit of a different story. The temperature tends to fluctuate a lot more in this region, likely due to proximity to the central basin where colder waters can come up. But we do expect it to be between 50 and 80% that season. We did also have loggers around other areas of Pelee Island, but they were showing us similar stuff. And we had loggers around Pelee Point, but they keep getting buried by sand because it is a very current-rich area. So overall, we've been conducting this study since 2022. We're going to continue in 2025, and we're actually planning this to be the last season. We're going to try and do both basins at the same time. And I do keep mentioning 50% and 80%, and why is that important? Well, the Lake Ontario Management Unit, when they were setting their new regulations, they considered 50% excess to be a safe, sustainable goal for their fishery. And if we look at where Lake Erie had landed, all of our areas that we had surveyed would have landed above this threshold from 2022 to 2024. So I'd just like to take some time to thank the many snorkelers and the boat operators who were involved in the survey, as well as the following for providing permission to survey around certain areas, in particular provincial park regions. But with that, I'll answer any questions.